You hearing me? I'm here. I'm on. Good evening, everyone. I want you to know, I'm really, truly not Diane Hamilton.
Is that
You're kind of changing positions.
I don't know whether it's on.
It is.
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, it's on.
Was it not?
Yeah, it's on.
Oh, well, everybody heard me anyway. Everybody always hears me as a loud voice. So, Diane has been directing and leading this group for forever. I usually sat over there at the table and did very little, and she has started a whole new thing that Provincetown needed. We needed an open mic that was just for writers, and we got it. And it has grown, and we came to the library, and the library has enhanced us, and they're flattering, thinking we've enhanced them, but the truth is they have really supported us and done a very good thing for us. And Diane, I'm just so grateful that she stuck with her dream. I think we all have dreams, things we'd like to do, things we'd like to share with other people. And most of us try it, and if it's difficult, we quit. Diane did not. And she's still the power behind the throne. But she's decided it's time for her to make a few changes and to share the job and the glory. It's kind of nice to stand up here and see that all these people are interested in this wonderful thing. And it's also a lot of work. She goes to a lot of work behind the scenes, getting things ready and doing things. So I think we should just give Diane a hand for having years. And you're going to find a different one of us up front leading, hosting the show every night. There's a whole group of people that keep this thing going. We have the Writer's Voice Corps, which is kind of a, I can't think of the word I want, but anyway, it's kind of a group that keeps us moving. It gives us ideas. And we have, Diane and I started it, then we have Matt, who's our strong support here. We have Rebecca, Jody Johnson, Laura Shabbat, and we are going to have Fred Long and Phoebe Otis as core members also. So we're going to have a vibrant group that's going to be leading you and us into a more productive, exciting time. I thank you all for coming. It's wonderful to have an audience, to have people here to see us. And Matt's going to do the PTV, or is Heather going to do it? I don't know. Somebody's doing it. And we're going to be on PTV again. And we thank Amy and Melissa and everybody who have helped us at PTV. And would you like to tell us when we're going to be seen, or do you know?
I do. Well, we're going to post the channel schedule on our Facebook with a link to the Vimeo, so you can watch it online. And I gave Matt the Vimeo link too, and I think he's going to send it out. So plenty of opportunities. That's a really great program.
Okay, good, good. All right, that's great. So we'll be on. We would ask you if you turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate if you have them with you tonight. And tonight, I am thrilled that we're having Tor Hansen. Tor knows a lot. He's been a naturalist for many years. He is also an artist and a sculptor. He does all kinds of wonderful nature things, and he is going to show us more than we ever thought anyone would be able to tell us about butterflies. His pictures are wonderful. His talking will be even better. And I'm going to let him tell you his story. I can't even begin to tell you all the things that Tor has done. He's been in Washington working. He's been on the whale boats, on the seashore, been everywhere. So So I'll just let him lead us into his life a little bit, and then we will see his production of Butterflies. Good work.
Well, yes, if I could flutter in like a butterfly. That was the original word in Great Britain, you know, for literary circles that chase after butterflies. In Great Britain, there was a Professor X who, in his lectures, interchanged butterfly and butterfly. And I guess we like butterflies over here, so that's what we call them today. Indeed, they do flutter. And it's a joy to come before you today with this book. And this is called Butterflies Across Cape Cod, a term that I coined because on the map, it's on the back of the book, you're going to see, well, was Cape Cod on the map with regarding butterflies? And the answer is, well, yeah, but there was no field guide. And I had worked at the Cape Cod Museum of Natural History for some time. Through the years, we realized there's very little evidence. Smedley had a nice collection of moths and butterflies downstairs in the archives. So to follow up on that, I decided to get busy photographing. And then John Hay, of course, is one of the founders of the Cape Cod Museum of Natural History. And when I submitted a book proposal, Michael Snell asked me to write it over again, of course, trying to be good about formatting. And then showing it to John Hay, he liked it enough to underwrite the project for us researching. But he said, get a second author. And so he went to, after some searching, we found Marc, who you may remember is a very excellent birder and a butterfly guy, and he's known as the Mothman in South Dartmouth, where he teaches and is the research director for the Lloyd Center at South Dartmouth, which is a nice place to visit, and it's off the Cape, but you know, the Cape is greater than the Cape was divided by the canal, and I'm in Wareham today. That was officially part of Cape Cod in our days before the canal was dug. So to get into the material, when you enjoy this book, the text we hope was racy enough so that if you're a rock repeller, you might think of that do or die moment when you have to make a decision and jump for the next rock in the handhold. Well, you'll see that on the inside cover, we have the monarch doing just that, but you can't get it unless you see it for yourself in real life. When you see the pupa, it's rather inert, but when you see the caterpillar changing into a pupa, we highlight it as the inside cover to go a little bit beyond the ordinary, so that you can see what a magical moment of triumph when it reaches around with a tool or with a peg leg that we call the cremaster, and it jabs for the little silken button, the little barbs hold, and it's safe and sound, but there's the do or die moment. I'll get into that as we see a picture or two. Okay, this is, not next slide, this is, just go back one please. This is an amulet from China. China, of course, is almost timeless in its civilization. It expanded its empire in the days of Chang Chen with silk. And this is almost analogous to a moth that has emerged from a silken cocoon. This is the endless knot, a favorite motif in China and in Asian art. And it could be found at Global Gifts, where I found it. And of course, it could also be a flower nectaring the butterfly, or a butterfly imbibing in a flower. So the art has really increased our awareness and our love of butterflies. The fine arts, the sculpture, the graphics, the drawings, the engravings, you name it. Even dance, modern dance. Someday I hope to write that compose an opera with the dance of the butterflies. So wish me luck on that.
Okay.
Now, next slide. Where do we start with this enormous project? Well, I went to the edge of the biosphere in Ecuador and looked over, and I saw frigate birds in the background and got ready to see butterflies in the interior. This is Villa de la Plata, the home of the frigate bird. But for our purposes, the joy of finding people who believe strongly in advancing computer graphics, such as Zachary Swift at Cape Photo and Art is sort of a semi-responsible for this slide. I designed gave the idea, and he finessed the graphics part. So he's like a partner in the production of composite slides. You can do that too as you get more proficient at composite slides and computer graphics. So let's pursue, next slide, the biosphere butterflies. We're going to go a little quickly. So this is Urania ripheus. It is a day-flying moth, not a true swallowtail. What? Well, it looks like a swallowtail to me, but it's all glitter as if it's ready for the Christmas tree. Well, they live in the rainforest, the Antilles, greater and lesser, and some in Madagascar. So already there's a confusion about whether it's a moth or a butterfly. So we can iron out the fine points of distinctions, remembering that it's an arbitrary distinction, that we separate moths from butterflies. It's like a lawyer saying yes or no. But they are all Lepidoptera, meaning scaled wings. Lepis is scale and doptera is wings. So the beauty of the butterfly can baffle us with the exceptionally metallic-like glow of the scales that enable the flight to really become aerodynamically agile. And so the butterflies are able to conquer flight in the air, negotiate the wind and the heavy sun. They also, next slide, will be engaging in basking to absorb heat from the sun, from the solar energy. They pick it up as pretty much like screens that absorb heat. Then, of course, if they get too hot, they can close their wings, align perpendicular to the sun, or just fly into the shade. This is a mating pair exhibiting or showing camouflage. These are the leaves of the crane reserve, and for whatever lucky me, I saw this, but I had to look closely because they were so much like the leaves, and this is to their benefit. So camouflage really assists butterflies in their survival. Next slide. This is Ornithoptera brookiana from Southeast Asia, Burma, Thailand, and Indonesia. And it is a birdwing. We call it a birdwing because when it flies, it looks like a bird. And it's characteristic only of Southeast Asia. But if you go on a trip there and you see you're near a stream, look for these butterflies drinking, imbibing, we think it's minerals in the mud and stream side. It's a wonder of creation. You can see these sometimes fluttering the butterfly houses. I'm now working at Butterflies of Cape Cod. It's a butterfly house in Bourne-Dale, right near Herring Run Road. At the first slide, if you get to the Sagamore Rotary, having left Cape Cod, and then you want to continue south on Route 6, the first street light, just turn right and you're there. And we have a butterfly pavilion, a flight enclosure with native butterflies, thanks to George and Ann Morris, who run that. Butterflies of Cape Cod. And a butterfly boutique gift shop for take home something special, earrings with butterfly wings, etc. Next slide. This is a beautiful Copaxa from Ecuador. We find these first by black lighting at night with a beautiful black light glows sort of a soft blue at night, and that's put out in front of a big white sheet that's hung up on the side of a building or on a screen, and that attracts many insects from the environs, and one of them is Copaxa, and this is sort of velvety. It's about 4 inches in wingspan, just another one of the myriads of moths and butterflies, the biosphere butterflies. Next slide. You might know this one is increasing its numbers in Cape Cod. You might see this right here in Provincetown this summer. It's called the giant swallowtail. That's Papilio crespontis, and it's a joy to see. It's a fast flying, very successful flyer, and will nectar at your tall zinnias and buddleia bushes and many of the plants that are covered in the book. In the back of my book, we have a whole list of plants for you to peruse that would be ideal for your butterfly garden. And that's how we expand populations. It's great to be able to have all of them appearing in your yard and in workplaces, etc. But we also have to think about caterpillars' requirements, because they need the food and they need to munch on tender leaves so that they can metamorphose into the chrysalis and then hatch out or emerge as a winged lord of the air. Metamorphosis, as our next slide, has long been a favorite topic of mine because of the changes that a caterpillar will go through to become a butterfly, or for that matter, the little egg starting out the life cycle after fertilization and mating grows or hatches out, and then in several instars, well, 5 in total, it has to molt 4 times to become a chrysalis. So this is the second stage: egg, caterpillar, chrysalis, and butterfly. And they feed here on citrus, if we have any orange trees that you can grow in your greenhouse, etc. But they're expanding their range northward into New England and have been seen all around Massachusetts every summer now. I saw one over at Pond House when I lived on Pond Road, and it was nectaring at purple loosestrife, which is considered an invasive plant by many, but it does nectar about 10 species of butterflies and bees too. That it must be, we have to have plants that continue the cycle of pollination, so important for the continuity of life on Earth. Okay, so next slide. What you need for the giant swallowtails is meadow rue. You can R-H-U-E, and when you're at the nursery, ask if it's available. Rue planted has a beautiful, delicate pink flower, but it's also favoring the caterpillars of the giant swallowtail. As climates change, so do the butterflies take advantage of warmer weather. This is a buckeye, and it's in Great Britain. They have a counterpart species called the peacock, and I think you can see that these false eye spots dramatize the relationship to the bird of paradise, who we call the peacock. Now, here we find them as immigrants to Cape Cod. They're not really indigenous, only because we don't have stinging nettles as their food source. So the caterpillars require nettles, and they were the bane of farmers and cows, so the early Cape Cod farmers eradicated stinging nettle. And so now today, which if we bring it back and cultivate it carefully, such as Wealthy Bay Wildlife Sanctuary has a stand of nettles just for red admirals and other butterflies of the realm. But actually, this is actually going to be also looking for plantain, and does well on broadleaf plantain while it's a caterpillar. As an adult, it's going to be a generalist. We find 2 kinds of feeders in terms of imbibing at flowers or ground water. They are generalists or specialists. Buckeyes too, like so many of the swallowtails and the monarch, are generalists. They feed and drink at many different flowers. The bog copper, it's so characteristic of the cranberry bogs right here on the Cape, are specialists, and they live only in cranberry bogs. The bog copper. Next slide. Here's the caterpillar, and we have them growing well, and there are special little blue flashlight spots on hybridization, or a very carefully breeding selection of the traits that we look for. Next slide. Is the blue can be found and achieved by careful inbreeding, so that the normal pattern is just brown in this buckeye, whereas in this one we have blue scales appearing that are natural, but they're brought about by methods of inbreeding, that is selective breeding biology. Next slide. So when you're at the Butterfly House, we urge you to attend it this summer. They're going to open on the 25th of May. It's really going to be a beautiful small-scale atrium, pavilion, flight enclosure, and outside a natural butterfly garden, so that you can see how we're encouraging here displaying native butterflies at this time. George is, of course, captivated by butterflies of the biosphere, so we might try a few tropicals here and there. And of course, this one is nectaring at, I think, the Indonesian impatiens. Impatiens will nectar certain butterflies, including sphinx moths. There's a black swallowtail that seems to be happy at impatiens too. What is nectar? Next slide. Nectar is found inside the petals down in a calyx. A calyx is the tube. It's like the vase where your flowers are displayed. And in that deep vase is the nectar well, where the liquid nectar is fructose and glucose, natural sugars created by the flower. And we think the relationship is somehow, it's not a written law, but the butterflies take advantage of the commensalism. That is, the plant found a way to bring in a pollinating insect by offering nectar, if we look at it that way. And the butterfly or moth flies in taking advantage of the offering, and as it flies about, perhaps the pollen grains on the stamen or from another same species flower is just nudging against the female part of the flower and cross-pollinating. So it's the two of them to have it evolve together. We might also call it coevolution. Okay, next. Baltimore checker spots create a phenomena here because their life cycle is timed to avoid a drought, late June into early July. They are already from caterpillars into chrysalis by the time that drought is on, and they are what I call bonanza. They used to be in twine field, depending on what we do. If we create green grass lawns, we're negating the beauty of the natural tall grasses and lanceolate plantain, which is their favorite. They've changed from ash, from turtlehead, because turtlehead is not very abundant. It's a stream-side, beautiful wildflower, but lanceolate plantain grows helter-skelter everywhere, or in many places, up by the Highland Lighthouse, right here in Twinefield, on the edges of beech forest, and it's a slenderleaf plantain weed. The caterpillars love it. So when you go to the Marston Mills airfield, just exit 5, Route 149, you'll see that there could be thousands of Baltimores in late June flitting all around the rough, because the airport's trying to work it out carefully. Once I discovered there's so many, I asked the caretakers, the management, not to cut, and they agreed they'll let everything grow in the rough, but only mowing the runways. And so that is to our favor, because now we're seeing how butterflies, if left natural, they can survive. There's much more to it. Next slide. But we just a brief survey today, so we can't get into that at length. I wish I had all that time. There's just a few birds. Like this is, we're looking for this hooded warbler again. It appeared last year on that maple tree by the boardwalk at Beech Forest. When you walk the loop trail near the restrooms, you will sometime soon come to a boardwalk. Before you complete that, on your right is this great big red maple. A red maple that is where this hooded warbler was photographed, a tip-off from somebody out by the island where it's good we birders talk it up between ourselves, because we ask, what have you seen? And I have seen the hooded warbler, she said. I'll tell you where it is. Look at me. Okay, so what a wonderful bird to have a yellow mask. To us it could be a humorous masquerader, but it also can actually confuse a predator. It might look like next slide. It might look like an aggression of untold magnitude to a smaller animal. Okay, next. Well, raccoons, they get into the act as well. They'll feed on caterpillars. They're part of the food chain. You know, butterflies supply enormous amount of caterpillars that feed the birds. Next slide. And the message is right now, I wish I had kept Tilly, my raccoon pet that I picked up in Wyoming as an orphan from a roadkill. His mother died in a car crash or run over on a highway. So I was the foster father of the raccoon for the rest of the summer. Drove to Massachusetts, and Tilly, next slide, loved scrambled eggs in the morning and shrimp if I could get to the market and buy her some shrimp. She was very reluctant to leave me to be taken into wild care. So that we avoided this whole trouble of rabies. So I couldn't keep her as a pet, but I had her for 3 months, and she would not let go of my blue jeans when the agent had to take her. Aww. So, you know, the story goes, I have partially through the story to finish that for publication. The message being, preserve biological diversity by all means, and think carefully about driving not too fast on the highways, and Yeah, I'd like to break for turtles, and I'll even break for butterflies. Nobody's behind me. Okay, next. So to launch into, next slide, we want to get a glimpse of what's so special about biodiversity. When you're in Ecuador, South America, look for this green, next slide, that's called a green-crowned wood nymph. And it is a dazzler among many species of over 230 hummingbirds. And so when we're trying bird conservation, is a wonderful eye to the world, the troubling world of human expansion by farm and industry, and our ability to preserve the habitat for the rightful owners, and the staggering diversity of beauty. The early scientists loved to go to South America to see such species as the green-crowned wood nymph. Next slide. This is a painting I did in watercolors to dramatize. Certainly faith can grow like the vine. And so it's also up to us to get to know all the inhabitants of the rainforest. This is Costa Rica, 7 species that occupy niches in the lowland jungle. Just a joy to see them. And here's the violet-crowned wood nymph, is the counterpart in Costa Rica. And the white-necked Jacobin, the violet ear, banner-tailed large hermit, or long-tailed hermit, little hermit, and rufous hummingbirds. Next slide. This another glimpse, just so that we realize that even here we have a ruby-throated hummingbird, and this is a dazzler also that makes an enormous migration to be present in the Maritimes. Next. Monarchs. Okay, let's take a brief look at the monarchs. They're in a precarious position today because of all the human pressures put upon them, including GMOs, not totally resolved yet, but there are conflicting arguments pro-GMO, genetically modified chromosomes, and corn, and other soy, and other alfalfa now. It interferes with pollination of bees in Germany, and the monarch too is being the numbers are reducing, and they migrate enormous distances, sometimes 3,000 miles from Canada to Michoacan. Next slide. And when they are in Cape Cod, they overwinter in Mexico, and 3 generations later, we see the grandchildren of the monarchs that left Cape Cod the previous autumn. And they can cross large distances over water. Fishermen often see them on their fishing boats. And we think they'll fly right over from Marblehead and Gloucester, Rockport, and land on the yellow outlined shores of Cape Cod. Next slide. Yellow outline. Well, look for yellow in the fall. This is probably early in the year, in the spring, when it's not totally green. But in the fall of September, Cape Cod is almost everywhere outlined by the goldenrod, the seaside goldenrod. That's their chief nectar source, the oasis that they can see that from above and fly down, sometimes in large numbers. You look for it in the back beaches, way towards the back, the high area, the high ground. Next. Wooded Lighthouse. Oh, there's this story about monarchs. There's one milkweed patch on the wood end, just one. It's right near the lighthouse. So if you check out there, go see it, especially when the milkweed blooms in July. And when you see that, you realize how long it can take to colonize some of that newest real estate. It's really a pile of sand, a wonderful beachhead, but the soil is just slowly being modified by monoecious plants, and some dye-ish like beach plum is growing there, but cherry's not there yet. And this is Rosa rugosa. It might nectar a butterfly, not a chief nectar source, but we think it's so beautiful, and it holds the dune as a ground cover. So woodend is on the map and growing and supporting at least 5 species. Next slide. Here's where you pick up a trail. This is Longnook Beach, headed towards Ballston. Now in the month of June, back in 1991, I walked this tide line. I found one Baltimore checker spot here, and I walked this all the way to Ballston, and I found a Pepperidge Farm cookie box, and then I put in 44 stranded Baltimore checker spot butterflies, because for somehow the waves The wind was moderate breeze, and there was a 2 to 3 foot chop that night and fog. And the butterflies may have been confused in their migration. They left Twinefield. Most likely that's the only mosaic in this area that's known. Maybe there are others that have yet to be discovered. So in your ramblings, you might get back to me about what you find. Please do. And when you walk there and you see some of them, 4 of them were feebly alive. So it was just recently that day that they began to be washed up by the surf. Some of them covered by the seaweeds, the eelgrass and the ascophyllum. Next slide. Okay, erosion has a big effect on butterfly habitat, let alone the geological soils of Cape Cod. The outline decreases, and some of the habitats for butterflies slides down the mountain and vanishes if the erosion is too strong. So a few years ago, I walked the shoreline looking for sea rocket that nectars American coppers. Next slide. And of course, keep in mind the lighthouse has been moved back 300 feet, is it? Or 3? And it too would have tumbled into the ocean by now. So we're seeing, next slide, that the erosion trails are, you can stand right at the base of the glacial scarp and hear the little pebbles and the bigger cobbles come tumbling down to the beach. But right along this interface of scarp and beach is a green plant that grows called sea rocket. Next. And a little closer, you can see that they are growing right there in the sandy zone. They are so tolerant of salt and the absence of true soil. Their roots can absorb nutrients in this sand. So this is all butterfly habitat. This could be seaside goldenrods gradually sliding, roots variously sliding down the slope. And you search for butterflies when it's in bloom, and that's in June and July. Next. There's the seaside goldenrod. A monarch can buy getting that fructose for spurious energy demands. Next. Here are the cobbles as they've accumulated. Next slide. This is before the sea rocket appears in that picture. You can look for butterflies that are deceased and wind-tossed, perhaps even stressed by the ocean and waves itself. Next. Now there's the plant called edentata, Cacilla edentata, and it is called sea rocket. And these little flowers provide nectar for American copper. Next. So it's also, if you're out in Woodend and you like beachcombing and you go along the edges of where the salt hay accumulates, the back beach where all that beach plum and wild mustard then grows quite close to the salty zone, that's where you find sea rocket. And these little butterflies are busy in late June, early July. Next. It's really a cavalcade of color when you see them up close. And of course, if you have a dead butterfly, just to take it to a microscope or a strong magnifying lens, and then you see how wonderfully they're constructed. Next. They have to reach in with that proboscis. That becomes quite a tool. I call it the remarkable proboscis because it is a sucking tube. It's a straw, and they suck up the fructose by reaching in, and sometimes that's difficult to get to where the nectar really is. So some of these are in the family Lycaenidae. Lycaenids evolved short tongues, and unlike the skippers that have evolved long tongues, they have to get to the nectar nonetheless. So they often resort to a little trick of the trade, which you might call a behavioral adaptation, natural selection adaptation. What they're given is a short tongue, so how do they get to that nectar that's deep-seated? They go to the base of the flower and pierce it. That is also a piercing tool. And then they can suck up or imbibe the nectar that's in the deep-seated nectar well. So more to their credit for being a little ingenious. Next. So what else do you plant in your butterfly garden? This is rabbit's foot clover. And of course, pink clover, red clover are ideal for many species. So plant a lot of clover. If you're tired of mowing your lawn, you can decrease it and make little mounds of color and plant lots of clover. And some nurseries go so far as providing rabbit clover, rabbit's foot clover, and other lycaenids like it, like our little eastern-tailed blue. So this book then began to expand. The idea was, oh boy, what a field, the whole Cape Cod. We have 77 species, that includes the migrants, about 170 across Massachusetts, over 1,000 North America worldwide. But here on the Massachusetts, we don't get all the Massachusetts butterflies because the Cape is somewhat removed. Was connected before the canal. Not that the caterpillars marched into Cape Cod determined, but they certainly could fly. How far can a butterfly fly in one day? Oh, those pioneers. Okay, next. Let's see, what we have is the Miracles of Metamorphosis. That's a painting I did in Hurricane Donna. And while the storm was raging, I was still at the canvas completing this. This is now in the Cape Cod Museum of Natural History. And it shows us the life cycle of the monarch butterfly. Here's the mating pair. And when the female flies up to the tender leaf, she might lay an egg, and then she might nectar first and then go about reproduction duties. Tiny caterpillars hatch out, and when they get fully grown after molting 4 times, the 5th molt produces the pupa or the chrysalis. And then over 16 days, 12 to 16 days later, in the life cycle, it goes about 24 days, 26 days, they shed that skin. This is what I talk about when this magic moment occurs. It's totally suspended by the old skin. The last segments grip that last little piece of it. It's like you get out of the old pajamas into new ones. Well, this is crinkled up, just like an accordion at that point. But how they manage to hold it in the segments of the abdomen and reach for the silk button that was spun way back here by the caterpillar. So even he's actually spinning the silken button, knowing that he has to grip that and then shed that skin. And then the skin is sloughed off once he's anchored at that. This is called a cremaster. It's like a peg leg, and it has little barbs on the end of it. Another ingenious adaptation, genetical adaptation and behavioral combined. And then, of course, later, 12 days later, it turns dark. The butterfly ready to emerge, it does emerge, and over 45 minutes is ready to fly. And these are other butterflies that, of course, why we call it the tree of life. Next slide. There are other things to see, too, that this is the cross-section of the sidereal dilator muscles. Fancy words for the muscles that control the suction ability of the imbibing butterfly. It's really a feat. And of course, the tongue can coil up just like a watch spring and is carefully stored and protected in the palps. This is like, the caterpillar didn't have these structures. This appears only in the butterfly. So what a metamorphosis it really is. This is a vignette of a caterpillar. Inside its little greenhouse, there's a little exit or a window, an oculus there that allows for temperature control. I mean, we would spend a lot of time at the drawing board if we didn't watch the butterflies, trying to figure out how they survive. And then, of course, here is a great story. Go into Harvard Zoological Museum and look for the Ware couple who devoted their lives to glowing glass models of bees and insects at flowers, and they're enlarged, magnified many times, and in that is the story of the polonium that carries the DNA picked up in one flower by the tarsal toe because they're sticky. When the butterfly or bee goes to get that, it has to try to find the nectar, and it stumbles through these little crevices, and that's where the polonium is, and the toe sticks to it, so it doesn't really know. Maybe it's unconscious, or is it a conscious cross-pollination? The bee flying to another plant, then walks over that corpuscle region, and somehow that transferred DNA packet is inserted into the corpusculum area, and it brings about cross-pollination. So figure that out. I think it's really awesome that the butterflies can do that. And not only that, I have a photo record of probably 8 species that also carry the pollinarium. Next slide. And we're seeing too, bees play a big role in cross-pollination. So here's the milkweed plant, and all those little pollinariums are gathered on the inside folds of the blossoms. Next slide. Oh, back one please. Something happened that I have to bring to light, that Horton's Campground is the site of one of our best butterfly mosaics or habitats in North Truro, certainly the Cape, and 5 or 6 different species, including hair streaks, and lots of skippers have vanished because the milkweed's all gone. And it grew all around the grassy knoll. There's a little hill in the back that was there for teeing off of the golf course next door. Whatever happened when it changed hands to Adventure Bound, I'm not pointing my finger at Adventure Bound, but something caused the milkweed to die back, and now there's only 4 or 5 plants, and maybe they'll recover. Has anybody been over there recently to see the milkweed? So we had a problem, and it wiped out the populations of all those butterflies. So one mosaic is gone. Let's hope we can find, how do we reseed it? Well, we go about a program to get seeds and plant them again. And hopefully it was not a GMO weed killer like Roundup. Next slide. So that's a serious matter of talking amongst each other and carefully networking so that conservation ethics are known and upheld. So here's the young caterpillar feasting on milkweed. Next. And as it grows into its final instar, that's how it looks with these fleshy, almost antennae-like feelers. And it's still puzzling to people who've studied them all their lives as to exactly the function, but it might be like antennae feelers, like a cat's whiskers. We're just not sure. Next. And there's a close-up of the little beast, and it has a huge appetite, but it's going to be able to change from this caterpillar, just like the Lewis Carroll through the looking glass. Who are you? And then it becomes a wonderful butterfly. Next. Upside down and secure. It has managed so far, it's just a hook on this is the outside exoskeleton. There's no skeleton in insects on the inside, so we call this the exoskeleton, even if it's soft. Beetles, of course, have a hard exterior exoskeleton made of chitin, calcium carbonate. Next. So it's in a letter J position for hours, and it's actually undergoing tremendous body changes. You know how many times you've remade the interior of your rooms? Just picture a caterpillar doing that in a few hours, and then it will become just like a butterfly, all wrapped up in onion skin thin tissue on the outside. It's very thin, and it gets through cold times and rain and hard sunshine inside the chrysalis. Some people claim that these dots are really gold, and I think others are saying, oh, you're not doing good chemistry. And segments, the body segments, carefully wrapped with wings, formative wings, aligned just like a sleeping pharaoh in a sarcophagus in Egypt. And there's the cremaster. That has shed its skin, and it's gripped solidly, or many little barbs up there grip that, and hopefully hold it fast through about 12 to 16 days. Next. A few days later, the scales are appearing on the wings, and emergence is imminent. Next. So out comes when it's time, and the hormone surge is on. This is synergistic hormone in action. It's something like prothoracic gland hormone combined with juvenile hormone together act synergistically in a balanced proportion to bring about the final molt so that it becomes a butterfly. There's a lot of intricacies. The chart that I use is by N.J. Barrow in the book Developmental Biology, because there all the pathways of the interacting hormones are identified. It's been well documented in studies of glands and hormones, endocrinology. Okay, next. Once out of the chrysalis, it begins the laborious process of pumping the body blood, called hemolymph, right out through into the veins of the wings that are still small and rather crumpled. Next. And here's the monarch, a little farther along, showing another feat that is almost making it a wonder of the world. How do you take two parts of a hose? Take a garden hose, slice it down the middle. How are you going to fuse that together to form the proboscis in butterflies? So, believe it or not, that's how it appears when the butterfly emerges. And shortly thereafter, right about there, this is already fused into one. And when it does that, it can coil it up and uncoil it at will. It's part of its grooming ritual. But this is now one tube. It's like a garden hose. Biologically has been put together and fused into one flexi straw. So it's all to their credit. The butterflies are astounding, and I'm still studying them as a lifelong pursuit. Next. Well, a few minutes along, maybe 5 minutes along, and the heart, the little true heart is inside this thorax. That's the second segment, head, thorax, abdomen, and the wings take shape. Next. And a little further along, and you can see that the wings are filling out. Usually it's the forewings first, and then the hind wings catch up. Next. Okay, so there we see it's almost ready for the hardening in the air. The oxidation seems to solidify. Once the wings are stretched, it's like your kite that you just put together. You connected the struts or the stays so that you stretch the membranes inside. Next. And here it is. This time it's the monarch puts out the hind wing first, and that is the forewing. Next slide. And then of course the forewings grow to full size. Next. And there's your butterfly. We must hurry along now because we have a lot to cover. Okay, next slide. So we're out in the milkweed meadow and wondering when are we going to see the migration. So this is September because the leaves are turning yellow. Once the milkweeds turn and the daylight hours decrease, the circadian rhythms take a big effect. The decreasing daylight hours and the temperature, the falling temperatures, remind the butterfly instinctually to take flight, and the gradual migration begins. Next. We had a lot of fun at University of Arizona talking about these things like circadian rhythms. You find them true in birds as well. I think we humans too are also. That's a scientific term that we just love because of the jargon in sciences. It's sometimes so fast that we all know what we're talking about in symposiums. Now there's a painting I did in oils to show that in Twineville, the goldenrod blooms. The finches are still golden and they're looking for whatever grows in seeds, and they're not there yet. There's a Peruva warbler. There's the migration underway, the butterflies. And down here we see the caterpillar ready to molt. This would be third generation on Cape Cod. There are 3. And then here's the chrysalis ready to emerge. Here's a hidden chrysalis that blends into the plants, and then out comes the butterfly, and he'll join the legions in the sky and head south for the winter in Mexico.
It's beautiful painting. It's beautiful.
Thank you. So I'm going to be painting new things, and I've moved to Wareham, but I'm happy in where I live. I have plenty of studio space, and it's not that far to drive.
Right, great. Well, they're beautiful. You really did lovely work.
Thank you. Next. Maybe I'll hope to have an exhibit of these paintings someday soon. Milkweed seeds, we're trying to make them available for people who want to plant the milkweed and designate it as a sacred plant so that we really keep the monarch in high numbers. They're going to need lots of numbers to really make it work for them. Next slide. You see how they have a parachute. They could be blown by the wind, and that's an asset too. It becomes easy for them to cover great distances if the wind is strong, and they lodge, and then by springtime seeds have worked themselves into the ground. Seeds actually have ability to get into the soil. There's time-lapse photographs of seeds of many plants that actually wiggle and propel themselves down into the soil. It's a living phenomena that plants can do that. Now this is the monarch migration underway, but how do we keep track of it and expand our knowledge? Well, the University of Kansas Entomology in Lawrence has devised tags with code numbers and dates so that this was caught initially and tagged in Wakefield, Massachusetts, and I think it flew 53 miles where I caught it in my backyard in North Truro while feeding it a butterfly bush. And so when you have a chance, examine closely the butterflies you see. Some of them may be tagged with catching and the numbers on the tag and the whole code related to, you can do this on the internet, it's called Monarch Watch. Google in Monarch Watch, plug in your number, and you'll get a response from Dr. Chip Taylor, who's there to head up Monarch Watch and figure out this enormous jigsaw puzzle. Where do all the monarchs go? Some of them not to Mexico, some in California, some in Cuba, some in Florida, but most of them to Michoacan. Next slide. Okay, so the butterfly book doesn't end on monarchs only. As you'll see, the joy of the expression of the youngsters. This was a day when the kids in Wareham went out with courtesy of the Lloyd Center, and they were part of a team that tagged monarchs that had to catch them with the net, with a teacher who did that. And the kids are getting good at it too, and then you have to go through with a pencil on a tag, remove the tape, push that, hold the butterfly securely, and on the hind wing, you could see the astonishment on the young lady's face because she didn't know anything about it. Now she's much closer to the natural world, and it's really effective, next slide, to help the young kids really get anchored into and remain in biology studies, awareness of nature's fascinating realms. So there is the tag, that's glued onto place, and you use the tail end of the eraser on the pencil to push that into place, and it sticks strongly enough to last all the way to Michoacan, Mexico, some 2,000 miles away. Next. See, they'll be going to the goldenrod and other plants in your garden, and then all sorts of the terrain where nectar is available as generalists. So when they reach their stronghold, this is the town of Angangueo in province of Michoacan and also nearby Mexico. These mountains were once covered with Oyamel fir, and then the process of farming marched uphill, and the temperature caused dryness and heat and GMO problems up north, coupled with drought and other problems, have forced the monarchs higher and higher into the mountains. So they really are going to undergo a stress as Mexico urbanizes and is intent upon pushing farmers up higher and higher to have crops for their families. So luckily this bioreserve was formed in 1986. Mexico today is doing a superb job of preserving the monarchs so that when we see them like this cluster up here, we're seeing the overwintering deadleaf butterflies that just hang in huge clusters by the millions this year. Next slide. The popular numbers are rebounding somewhat from last year, 2014, but they're still perilously close to showing that there are enormous problems as they go north, especially where we grow corn fence to fence and use intensive weed killers like glyphosate and Roundup. Several companies say no to that, so there's enormous discussion that goes on, people who care. Now this is the name, it's Reserva Biosfera Mariposa Monarca in Michoacan, Mexico, and of course that's just the title page I use for my shows. Next slide. Here's the grove that you might see if you go to Chinqua and El Rosario. And left and right, sometimes you wouldn't think it's living, you just look at it and you think it's just leaves on the fir trees. And then you see one move and there's a burst of orange, and then by midday and late February, the temperatures are warm enough so that the butterflies take to the air and it's orange medallions in the sky. And it's a very transcendent feeling. And I've been there just last year, 2014, and to witness it is a staggering thing. It's astonishing to know how wonderfully cohesive is their behaviors for them to do this. And they're always silent and they don't have a spoken language that we can interpolate. Next. This is some of the curtain effect that you see way up high. It's about 9,000 feet. And it's difficult for some who are not in great physical shape to climb that staircase. The Mexicans did a magnificent job of beautiful masonry so that walking is very easy as you go higher and higher from base camp. And then you get to the top, you have all the monarchs are asleep in the morning, and then by noontime you're seeing 1, 2, 3 little bursts of orange, and then lots and lots of tourists there. And then some of the butterflies actually can get trampled underfoot if we're not careful. So it's always a lesson for the youngsters that people, wherever they're walking, to just take note of what they're walking over. So it's a joy to see this, and we have to make sure it's an ongoing phenomenon. Next. Close-up pictures. You have to see it to believe it. And it's quite silent and still. There's gentle wind, there's filtered sunlight above, sometimes cloud cover, pink flowers on certain kinds of Mexican milkweeds. And birds are feeding on them here and there, such as red warblers and orange-headed grosbeaks. And little wings, what's left of, they eat the bodies of the monarchs and they tumble down. But it's only a fraction, it's nothing to worry about, because that's part of the natural cycle, the food chain. Next. There they are in all their glory, just a few to remind us that they may have started their lives in Cape Cod, made it all the way to Michoacan without a passport, and without a bank account, and without having to buy new tires for the car. So, next slide. And of course, we appreciate it when we see Mexico is very proud of its new actions to curtail the spread of lumbering. Illegal lumbering has taken a toll on the Oyamel fir, and now it's been totally stopped, and the Mexican government interceded and totally burned out the mills that still existed. So the mills are all gone within the reserve, and that you can find. There's a beautiful booklet with all the facts and the outlines of the reserve. And the trip I went on was through expedition travel. Now it's coupled or linked with Holbrook and expedition travel Gainesville, Florida. And that's also linked with University of Florida and Florida State Museum. Next. Little Zoe was 10 years old when she saw all this. This was 2014. Next slide. And she's just getting the gist of the fascination that occurs when we see this little creature could go so far without a road map. So how does it do it? Well, we think it's genetic memory. We think it could have an internal clock. There's research going on. University of Arizona also is doing some nice research to think that it's a clock, and yet it's a compass. How does that work internally? Magnetite. We know that humans have magnetite in our brains. It's naturally there. It's nothing to take fright of, but it does have a charge, a magnetic charge. A reason why we have a great electrical potential within us. So they think that the butterflies also, through research, have magnetite. And that might link to a magnetic relationship to the position of the sun in the sky, decreasing photoperiod, the sun moving southerly. With each day, butterflies from Cape Cod, they can, from Canada or Washington State, they can just go about 200 miles a day, 200 miles a day if the conditions are right. They take advantage of the jet stream on azure days and flap and glide, but they can glide a long distance. Next slide. So we'll return, and I hope she will, she'll never forget this experience. It's a wonderful eye-opening time when you see the effort of the conservation people to give us a chance to see all this, to facilitate it, make enough money on entrance fees, and rescue facilities are there, and it's a very good scene. You can even ride a horse, ride up and ride back down again if you have difficulty walking. So think on these things, go there and see it for yourself, and then we've got to look closely at the problems in the USA, North America, the farmlands. How serious is the GMO problems? Next slide. And, we're going to bid adios to dear Mexico just remembering that it's all up to us, that we are once aware we have to spread that word, that habitat has to remain intact wherever it is. We can farm, but we also have to keep room for all the organisms. What time do we have? Am I just about 7:05? Next slide. And when they reach Cape Cod, the next June, they're late by a month some of these last years. Instead of June 1st, when I usually saw them at Hortons and the golf course, they're now coming in as late as July 17th. So we have a developing situation. Next slide. They'll be nectaring in the fall at Seaside goldenrod, and most goldenrods mature as flowers in late summer. So in midsummer, they go to this wild rose mallow. This is monomoy. And monomoy's ponds are surrounded by beautiful pink hibiscus growths. You should see it. I wish we still had our trips to Monomoy for guests and overnight at the lighthouse, the way the Museum of Natural History used to provide those trips. And I was the naturalist to actually cook breakfast and supper and offer you a glass of wine in the evening when we go stargazing and birding in the morning. I actually saw a young fawn deer chasing a sandhill crane around and around. Next. So in our book, we just touched on 77 species, but the book is very colorful. Next slide. You see how we combine the map with the actual directions of where to find the sites. There are beautiful butterfly houses springing up. This one is up in Westford. It's called the Butterfly Place. And it's like a game board in which you can put your head into that circle and smile like a butterfly, have your picture taken. Next. That's Marc and he's on the trail. He's looking for activity in the milkweed at Hortons up here by the lighthouse, the Highland Light. Next. Marc really worked hard at finessing and bringing up the pictures so that the subject matter would fill the frame, and going over all the literature and doing an excellent flight period. You'll see that there's a great flight period page here. Let's see if I can find it, but it's a graph, and the darkest ink is telling you when there's the best density of when the butterflies fly. And that, of course, is species specific. Each butterfly has a different flight time as an adult. That's tiger swallowtail and milkweed. Next. They're emerging now, and you might see this. That's my emblem of Ralph Waldo Emerson's effort to bring out what we call halcyon grandeur. And he wrote extensively using that metaphor. Halcyon grandeur is the bygone days when the grandeur was intact, when diversity was reaching wonderful proportions of the plenty of the cornucopia of wildlife, the many species interacting before the intrusion of urbanization and us taking too much away from their habitat. So with that in mind, that's my butterfly. When I think of it, I dream of the Catskill Mountains. When as you go up a trail and overlook mountain, you'll see the tiger swallowtails weaving in and out of the canopy. So I have a vision, and I hope you have a good one too. You know, may it be so. I think I have to call it there on account of time, right?
Well, you can, I don't know, you can take a few more minutes. We have only 3 open mic people.
Yeah. Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Okay. Because there are some nice things you want to
Give
cover.
you a few more minutes then?
Say 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Best? Okay. Next picture. The butterfly you just saw is a coral hair streak. This one is the skipper. Do note this long tongue. This is what I was talking about a long tongue. Now, how in the world does that become functional? It looks like as thin as a needle, a glass-headed pin, and thinner. How can it be hollow and still functional? So you put your thinking cap on and we'll take a close look. So if you're into research, you could dissect a butterfly and try to gauge the millimeters, so less than millimeters. And this nectar is produced in the milkweed. That's missing at Hortons now. That's the Delaware skipper. But it's widespread. Luckily, it's a widespread species. Delaware skipper. Next. American copper. They also cling to the milkweed as their source of sustenance, but they are generalists. They can nectar clover and other flowers. And here's the skipper. Contrast, it has a very long tongue, whereas lycaenid butterflies have a somewhat short tongue. Next, there are two skippers, and they are imbibing, again, in milkweed. They'll go upside down. They're truly acrobats. They're very capable of acrobatic somersaulting in midair and zoom about. I call them zoomers and acrobats. They're in the family Hesperiidae. There's a diverse group that are treated in the book where we come to colorful pages, towards the glossary. Middle of the book, we have my photographs that highlight all the species that we commonly see and a few rare ones. So you want to get to know hair streaks and skippers, and then phallids, pierrids, and papilionids, the full gamut. So it's a treat. You know how John Hay was a lover. He was a writer too. He wrote Herring Run, and he wrote Next Picture. He wrote The Spirit of Survival about our terns, the common, the roseate, and there's the least tern. And just today, out at Beach Forest, I was able to talk to the president of the American Butterfly Association. He was showing me his pictures of terns, common and least, that are returning to the shoreline of Cape Cod this year in encouraging numbers. Thanks to God that we're listening. Now here is the pollineum. So that's what you look for when you go to a milkweed, and you wait a while and you maybe pack a lunch and follow the butterflies about. And you should see skippers and checker spots and lycaenids, monarchs, swallowtails, all of them, including the bees, can pick up the pollineum and the DNA package. Next. Here's a close-up view. It's just a sticky surface, so it adheres to the tarsal toe. Next. And there's Tor with his book in a state of wonderment, or trying to make sure I got it right. It took a lot of thinking and going over and over again. And a nice butterfly in cloth by Tawanda, and I still wear. Out in the field, the Crane Reserve. Crane Reserve is in Falmouth, Mashpee, off Route 151. It's an excellent, big and wide expanse of several square miles of butterfly habitat in the open field. That's Asclepias orange milkweed. Next. So let's see. I can't show you all the nice things, but I want to close with tribute to John Hay, Marc Mello, and a number of people, including Dick Wheeler, who was able to see it through committee and the Board of Trustees. Without Dick Wheeler, who is the temporary director of the Cape Museum of Natural History, it wouldn't be in print, because they almost said no because of the cost of color. So we did stay with the color. Patriot Press put it together, and I want to thank them for using these little metallic bindings so that you can take this into the field, and it fits nicely in your knapsack, your rucksack, or in a big pocket, and you can even attach it to a clipboard if that's your style. And when you go out, just don't be afraid to read up, because we have excellent species accounts. Next. And we're keen on showing you the joys of following along metamorphosis. On the last page of the inside cover, we have the Cecropia moth caterpillars. I raise them every year. You'll see some of them in the butterfly house at Bourndale. And the caterpillars are showing you how they shed skin and become this moth, the Cecropia moth. Okay, so I think that's about it. And I'm so proud of the museum for allowing me to do that. And I put hours and hours of research into it, and so did Marc. And it's still one of the best, it's the best field guide in the field.
Are you selling them here today?
Yeah, I have them for sale.
Yay.
How much? How much are they?
They're $15 each.
Wow.
Yes?
Question?
Yeah.
Where did butterflies first originate, and how long have they been around? Are they pretty old
Yeah,
insect?
I'm working on a new DVD that will address that. And we have evidence through fossils, living evidence, dead fossils, but they lived in, if you go to Florissant, Colorado, Florissant National Monument, you'll see on display the story of how the shale and mud sediments accumulated in a fast-running river and buried a lot of butterflies. And only a few have come to light as rock hounds like us with our hammers and our chisels separate the layers of shale to find and press the beautiful butterfly. And 38 million years ago, that river was running. And of course, that gives us latitude, and that's Eocene time. That's in the Paleozoic that followed the age of the dinosaurs. We're now in the age of mammals. That's not the earliest, but that occurred with the invasion of inland seas, and then they dried up, and then the life was fossilized here and there, but not everywhere, because you have to have certain conditions to have fossils in the first place, such as mudslides. And sometimes that would spuriously or quickly bury what is ever there. And we think that the volcanic eruptions, I'm just typifying the usual scenario, that the volcanic erupted with lots of ash, and that ash floated down and imprisoned the butterfly down into the stream, and then the continuous silting in of the ash rose higher and higher through more and more volcanic action that was characteristic of the Cenozoic, the Eocene, at 40 million, 38 million years ago, for example. So that takes us a view of that then and there. But if we go back farther, we find moths even earlier in the Jurassic fossil record. We're going on just the fossil record. That we can't assume that they just started at Jurassic, which is 100 and 200 million years ago, or 180 million years ago. They're probably well advanced into various genera of moths. One found in Australia's strata that dates about Jurassic time, when the T-Rex was living and the Triceratops and the Stegosaurus walked the earth. Did they walk right past the milkweed plant? Were flowering plants evident at that early age? Remember, Lauren Isley wrote in his incredible journey, and then there's another one that talks about the rise of the angiosperms, the flowering plants. They begin to be noticeable in what we think is the fossil record in the Paleozoic that follows the age of dinosaurs between 65 and 50 million years ago. It's the rise of flowering plants. So the butterflies appear to be paralleling that, but in my work, in my studies, I'm trying to focus often on what comes first, the chicken or the egg, and then in some cases you see that imbibing at sand, whether it's at the high tide line like the morning cloak is known to do, and that's a butterfly that's flying today in beech forest, and it can also imbibe sap at not only oak trees but at beech trees. I didn't show you that today because this is an introduction, and I wanted to show you the monarch butterflies. But if we have another session, and maybe I could do this as continuing education, night class in study of butterflies, we could show you that the pictures that Linda and I found by walking beech forest, not the outer trail, but the edge of in the beech forest, there are trees where the sap is oozing. It could be commensalism of certain insects like flies and bees and beetles that all keep open a nectar wound, if you will, that allows the sap to run like in gathering a maple syrup. And the butterflies are there to sip and drink the sap directly with that remarkable proboscis. So it's an unanswered question, Diana. We're always on the trail trying to figure out where can we go to find it in the fossil record, or just start questioning, drifting back in geological time.
Thank you.